I will close on that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. And I'm going to recognize myself now for 5 minutes of questions. And my first question is actually for all 5 of you gentlemen, and we'll start with you, Mr. Norton, and go down the line. And first off, I appreciate y'all's written testimony. I appreciate y'all's oral testimony as well. We're in such an important time. And you know, there is decades worth of experience sitting at this table looking at this important issue, and I think you give the American people some comfort. And so my first question, I think this is a yes-no question to all of y'all. On 8 November, can a cyber attack change the outcome of our national elections? Mr. Norton.
I'm confident that that will not be the case.
Dr. Appel?
I think.
Mr. Secretary Kemp?
No.
Mr. Hicks?
No.
Dr. Osment?
No.
Excellent. Dr. Appel, Mr. Appel, excuse me. When you did your research in hacking the equipment, that was done in a controlled environment, is that correct? Was it one machine, or were you able to access multiple machines? Were they connected, or did you have to access them each individually?
These machines don't connect to that.
So none of the machines connect to each other, is that correct?
The kind of machine that I hacked that we use in New Jersey do not connect to any network.
And they do not connect to any network, so that means they're not facing the internet as well. Right.
That's right. In particular, the kinds of machines that we use in New Jersey and in the same machines are used in Louisiana. I don't know of any practical way to hack them through any kind of network. The only way I know that they can be hacked is by someone with physical access to them.
So there's no practical way to hack these voting machines unless you have physical access. And then if you have physical access, you have to have physical access to each box, because none of the boxes are actually connected, nor are they connected to the internet.
That's true for many kinds of touchscreen voting machines, but not for all kinds that are in use today.
And Secretary Kemp, I just want to clarify that, and I guess this question to you is as your role as the Vice Chairman of the Association of Secretaries of State. There are no voting systems that connect to the internet, correct?
Well, Commissioner Hicks can back me up on this, but I know our systems are not. I wouldn't want to speak for every state in the country, but I would feel very confident in saying the vast majority, probably all, are not connected to the internet.
Mr. Hicks, do you have any opinions on that?
From what we've determined, no voting machines are connected to the internet.
So let's take one municipality, one voting district. They probably have how many machines? Is there an average number, 5 to 10, 5 to 25? In one voting location. Let's take a voting location.
Well, I think in Georgia, depending on the jurisdiction, certainly in a precinct in Fulton County, you could have, I would say over 100 machines. In a smaller rural county, you may have 5 to 10.
And so, Mr. Appel, in that scenario, an attacker would actually have to have access to all 100 in the one county in order to manipulate the records.
In Georgia, that's not the case. The machines used in Georgia have been demonstrated to be hackable through a virus that's carried on ballot definition cartridges, very much like the Stuxnet virus was inserted into nuclear centrifuges in Iran. So,
and in that auditing system, in the auditing of these machines, we look at that. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So in those machines that have that vulnerability in the auditing process, isn't that scanned? Don't we scan for that?
It's difficult to scan for that vulnerability in the sense of if you ask a machine to report what software is loaded in it, if it's fraudulent software, it will lie. So the AccuVote TS machines used in Georgia and in a few counties in other states are particularly vulnerable to this kind of virus that can be carried to the machines even if the criminal attacker doesn't touch the machines or is not even in the same state with the machines.
Copy.
The touchscreen voting machines used in most other states I don't know of any such way to hack them through a virus carried on cartridges.
Dr. Osment, do you have any opinions on that? And when you provide best practices and information sharing to folks that request your assistance, is this type of vulnerability that y'all notify folks of?
You know, I think it's a good opportunity for me to elaborate on my answer. First, we have to always be vigilant. In the field of cybersecurity, we can never relax. We have no indication that adversaries are planning cyber operations against U.S. election infrastructure that would change the outcome of election in November. And we have overall confidence in the system. You know, individual parts of the election system are more or less vulnerable. You can never eliminate all vulnerabilities. But the overlapping layers of the system are what give us confidence. The fact that there is a wide variety of machines in use, a wide variety of procedures across jurisdictions, many checks and balances, physical controls, and the devices are not connected to the internet. So I cannot speak to the security of an individual device. What I can speak to is that overall we view the security of the overall system as robust. We can never relax, obviously, and that's one reason that we are offering voluntary assistance to state and local governments.
Thank you, Jim. And now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Liu, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Earlier this year, Donald Trump asked Russia to hack an American citizen. We know from later media reports that Russia has hacked the Democratic National Committee, as well as the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and other entities for the purpose of influencing American elections. And my question for you, Dr. Osman, is what steps is DHS taking to try to prevent Russia or other foreign entities from influencing the American election this November?
Thank you. Without speaking as to the source of the intrusions into the DNC and DCCC, I do want to talk about some of what we're offering to state and local government officials. First, we're offering them best practices. For example, we recently published a document on best practices for securing voter registration.
The Subcommittee on Information Technology will come to order. Thank you all for the indulgence. I think we have one more opening remark, and then we'll get to the question and answer. Mr. Norden, bring us back in. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd, Ranking Member Kelly, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. For those who don't know, the Brennan Center at NYU Law School is a think tank and public advocacy group, a nonprofit that works on issues of democracy and justice. And I have led the Brennan Center's work on election technology and security for over a decade. There are 2 points I want to convey today. The first is that real threats to our election integrity need to be treated with the utmost seriousness. Among other things, that means that we need to distinguish between genuine threats and sensationalistic rhetoric. Second, the biggest danger, I believe, to the integrity of our election this November are attempts to undermine public confidence in the election. Specifically, as we've heard from others, attempted attacks against voting machines are highly unlikely to have widespread impact on vote totals this November. However, attacks or malfunctions that could undermine public confidence are much easier. I want to echo what some of the other witnesses said today. It's important when we have public discussions about election systems and security that we distinguish between the different kinds of systems that there are. Campaign email servers are obviously very different than voter registration databases, which are very different than voting machines. On the topic of voter registration databases, Mr. Osman and Secretary Kemp, I think, did a very good job talking about the kinds of steps that are being taken to make them secure. The good news is, when it comes to the integrity of our elections, there are relatively straightforward steps to ensure that any attack or hack against voter registration databases should not prevent people from voting. And most importantly, regular backups of these systems should allow us to reconstruct lists on if, and I should emphasize this has not happened anywhere as far as I know, if data is changed on those registration databases. And as far as I know, every state does this. On the issue of voting machines, a lot of ground has already been covered about why they are different than registration databases, that voting machines should never be connected to the internet, that we have a decentralized system with 10,000 election jurisdictions using different machines, having different rules, and I agree with all that. The one thing I would add is that was not noted is the vast majority of people this November will vote either on a paper ballot that is read by a scanner or will vote on a machine that has a paper trail that they can review. And by my estimates, about 80% of Americans will do so. And that can serve as an important deterrent and should provide voters with confidence that there is a check to ensure that their votes have been accurately recorded. These facts and others that are detailed in my testimony and that others have mentioned make it highly unlikely that there could be a successful widespread attack to change vote totals. Having said this, I want to talk about the problem of aging equipment in the United States. I do believe that if this is not addressed, it can do real damage to voter confidence and therefore the integrity of our elections. And this is particularly true now when there are discussions of Russian hacks and rigged elections so much in the public discourse. In 2015, I oversaw a year-long study that looked at this. We found that 42 states are using voting machines that are over a decade old this November, and that's perilously close to the end of projected lifespans for these machines, particularly those designed and engineered in the 1990s. I want to be clear that that's a rather blunt tool to measure when systems need to be replaced. I'm not saying that every machine, when it reaches 10 years old or 15 years old, is suddenly going to stop working. Before I came into this hearing today, I saw a 1965 Ford Mustang running, and it looked like it was running perfectly. And obviously, the kind of maintenance and investment that is put into machinery can allow it to work much longer. And Georgia's a great example of this. They have a project with Kennesaw State where they really invest in their equipment, and they're using machines that most other jurisdictions have had to replace because they put that investment into them. But the interviews that we conducted...
There's a better way to face these attacks and future potential threats than what has currently been proposed by DHS with designating election systems.
As I will explain, I strongly recommend that, at a minimum, the Congress seek to ensure the elimination of direct recording electronic voting machines, sometimes called touchscreen machines, immediately after this November's election, and that the Congress require that all elections be subject to sensible auditing after every election to ensure that systems are functioning properly and to prove to the American people that their votes are counted as cast. There are cybersecurity issues in all parts of our election system. Before the election, voter registration databases. During the election, voting machines. After the election, vote tabulation, canvassing, precinct aggregation computers. In my opening statement, I'll focus on voting machines. The other topics are addressed in a recent report I have co-authored entitled 10 Things Election Officials Can Do to Help Secure and Inspire Confidence in This Fall's Elections. In the U.S., we use two kinds primarily of voting machines: optical scanners that count paper ballots and touchscreen voting machines, also called direct recording electronic. Each voting machine is a computer running a computer program. Whether that computer counts the votes accurately or makes mistakes or cheats by shifting votes from one candidate to another depends on what software is installed in the computer. We all use computers, and we've all had occasion to install new software. Sometimes it's an app we purchase and install on purpose. Sometimes it's a software upgrade sent by the company that made our operating system. Installing new software in a voting machine is not really much different from installing new software in any other kind of computer. Installing new software is how you hack a voting machine to cheat. In 2009, in the courtroom of the Superior Court of New Jersey, I demonstrated how to hack a voting machine. I wrote a vote-stealing computer program that shifts votes from one candidate to another. Installing that vote-stealing program in a voting machine takes 7 minutes per machine with a screwdriver. I did this in a secure facility, and I'm confident my program has not leaked out to affect real elections. But really, the software I built was not rocket science. Any computer programmer could write the same code. Once it's installed, it could steal elections without detection for years to come. Voting machines are often delivered to polling places several days before the election, to elementary schools, churches, firehouses. In these locations, anyone could gain access to a voting machine for 10 minutes. Between elections, the machines are routinely opened up for maintenance by county employees or private contractors. Let's assume they have the utmost integrity. But still, in the U.S., we try to run our elections so that we can trust the election results without relying on any one individual. Other computer scientists have demonstrated similar hacks on many models of machine. This is not just one glitch in one manufacturer's machine. It's the very nature of computers. So how can we trust our elections when it's so easy to make the computers cheat? 40 states already know the answer. Vote on optical scan paper ballots. The voter fills in the bubble next to the name of their preferred candidate, then takes this paper ballot to the scanner right there in the precinct and feeds it in. That OpScan voting machine has a computer in it, and we can't 100% prevent that computer from being hacked. But that very paper ballot marked by the voter drops into a sealed ballot box under the OpScan machine. Those ballots can be recounted by hand in a way we can trust. Unfortunately, there are still about 10 states that primarily use paperless touchscreen voting computers. There's no paper ballot to recount. After the voter touches the screen, we have to rely on the computer. That is, we have to rely on whatever program is installed in the computer that day to print out the true totals when the polls close. So what must we do? In the near term, we must not connect the voting machines to the Internet. The same goes for those computers used to prepare the electronic ballot definition files before each election that are used to program the voting machines. That is, we must not connect the voting machines even indirectly to the Internet. Many able and competent election administrators already follow this best practice. I hope that all 9,000 or 10,000 counties and states that run elections follow this practice and other security best practices, but it's hard to tell whether they do consistently. These and other best practices can help protect against hacking of voting machines by people in other countries through the Internet. But they can't protect us from mistakes, software bugs, miscalibration, insider hacking, or against local criminals with access to the machines before or after elections. So what we must do as soon as possible after November is to adopt nationwide what 40 states have already done: paper ballots, marked by the voter, countable by computer, but recountable by hand. In 2000, we saw what a disastrously unreliable technology those punch card ballots were. So in 2002, the Congress outlawed punch card ballots, and that was very appropriate. I strongly recommend that the Congress seek to ensure the elimination of paperless touchscreen voting machines immediately after this November's election.
Thank you, Dr. Appel. The committee stands in recess until immediately following votes.
Lieutenant governors and other elections officials back home and ask them what they're doing, what they're doing to prepare. I would encourage all American citizens to do that as well. I think they'll be very pleasantly surprised to see that the preparations that are going on all across this country to make sure we have secure, accessible, and fair elections in Georgia. And I certainly would appreciate any more collaboration that we can have with this committee or other members of Congress and the National Association of Secretary of States to work together in the future.
Mr. Hicks.
Saturday marked the 45 days before the election, and on that day, ballots were sent out to our men and women overseas so that they can start casting their ballots back. Early voting is going to start soon for many states, and one of the messages, and the message that I want to make sure is clear today, is that our elections are secure. We, on our website and throughout the nation, when we've gone around this country, have talked about our Be Ready 16 campaign to talk to states about how they can secure their elections. elections, how to make sure that the ballots are being counted accurately and so forth. And, come November 8th, we know that we will have an election, and that election will be secure.
Dr. Osment.
We must be vigilant, as we must always be in an area where there are cyber threats. Particularly as many states upgrade their voting systems over the next 4 years, we must build those systems to have more cybersecurity that stops not just the attacks of today, but the attacks of the future, when they'll still be used in 2030 or 2040. But overall, and right now, we have confidence in the integrity of our electoral system. We have no indication that adversaries are planning cyber operations against U.S. election infrastructure that would change the outcome of this election. We believe that the diversity and many different levels of checks and balances in our electoral systems are sufficient, that we should all have confidence in the integrity of the system and the election.
Thank you, Dr. Osment. Now I'd like to recognize the Ranking Member Cummings for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm concerned very much about the cyber situation, but I'm also concerned about African Americans and Hispanics and so many others who've been blocked from voting. I think that I will go to my grave trying to do everything in my power to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to vote. My foreparents were denied it over and over again, and I'm seeing a lot of the same things happening today. Mr. Kemp, you as Secretary of State for Georgia, which is one of the 3 states that was allowed to modify the federal form to require proof of citizenship in your state based on the unilateral decision of Brian Newby, the EAC Executive Director. I understand that you submitted a request for this modification, but in addition to that, did you or anyone in your office have communications with Mr. Newby or anyone else at the EAC relating to this request?
I'd have to look back and see if that was the case before or after. I know we had written letters asking for this issue to be treated like the EAC had treated previous instances, where we could simply treat the federal form the same way that we treat the state form in our state.
Can you please provide this committee with the copies of all email or other communications between you or anyone in your office and anyone at the EAC about this issue? Would you do that first, please, sir?
We can do that.
Thank you. Mr. Kemp, what evidence did you submit to the EAC demonstrating that the modification you requested was necessary for the administration of elections in Georgia?
Well, we were simply trying to, as I said earlier, match the state form with the federal form.
Will you provide the committee with all documents relating to that issue also?
We certainly can look into that.
No, that's not what I asked you. I said, would you provide us with the documents, sir?
Well, I wouldn't be able to answer that question, but I can certainly look into that and get back to you.
I'd like you to provide to the committee any and all documents that you and your office have relating to any analysis you did regarding the impact on eligible voters that your request would have. Did you look into that? Keep in mind, in North Carolina, what they did is they systematically figured out when black people vote, they figured out how they vote, and then they, with precision, made sure that they did everything in their power to stop them from voting. And so I just want to make sure that we have documentation. I'm sure whatever you did is proper, but I'd just like to know it would be congressional malpractice on my part as a son of people who could not vote to sit here and have you all here and not address this issue. So I'd just like to have the documents, that's all. I'm sure you got justification.
Well, Representative, it's really a pretty simple thing that we were trying to do. We were simply trying to make the federal form have the same questions as the state form. But I will tell you, as the state of Georgia, under my administration and leadership, we have implemented online voter registration, where anybody that has a driver's license or a state-issued ID card can register to vote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we've had over 360-something thousand people that have used that system. Right now, we have a student ambassadors program that we started last year with a pilot of 14 high schools around the state and 150 kids. It's now ballooned to over 800 students in any kind of high school that you can imagine across the state of Georgia. We have over 102 high schools where we're actually teaching students in the school to register their peers to vote. So I can assure you, if anybody that meets the requirements and wants to register to vote in Georgia, they can easily do so.
I'm glad to hear that. I just have two more questions. The Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit temporarily halted and reversed the unilateral action by the EAC Executive Director. However, prior to that, do you know how many voters in Georgia have tried to register using the federal form and were turned away because they did not provide proof of citizenship?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
And how long will you need to get back to us on that? Can you get that information?
I'll have to check on that and get back to you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as I said, I'm just concerned when Justice Ginsburg was talking about Texas. I think it was in the Shelby case, and she was saying that 600,000 Texans would not be able to vote. I mean, if we want to have an emergency, that's what the emergency ought to be about. Every single person, I don't care whether they're Tea Party, Green Party, Democrat, or Republican, I will fight for their right to vote. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy, and I look forward to your responses, Attorney General, Secretary of State Kemp.
Let me just make one point. While we were asking for the form to be changed, we never stopped taking the federal form.
But can you understand, and I'm almost finished, Mr. Chairman, but can you understand why African-American people, Hispanics, and others might be upset when people are blocking, I'm not saying you, when people are blocking them from voting, when they're paying taxes and working hard and doing everything they're supposed to do and not be able to vote? I mean, can you understand it?
Well, I can understand it, but I can assure you that that's not happening in Georgia. Actually, we've seen minority participation increase in our state.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our witnesses for taking the time to appear before us today. If there's no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.